Let me ask you something right now, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. When was the last time you truly focused on you, not on him, not on what he's thinking, not on how to get him back? But you, your goals, your energy, your peace. You see, we live in a world that teaches us to chase. To chase love, attention, validation. But the truth is, what you chase runs away. What you embody attracts. That's the secret. The moment you stop making someone else your center, and you make you the center of your universe again, that's when the magic happens. That's when he starts wondering where you went. That's when he starts to feel your absence, not just physically, but energetically. That's when the shift begins. You don't need to beg. You don't need to explain yourself endlessly. You don't even need to convince anyone of your worth. Because once you anchor into your power, once you reclaim your attention and invest it back into yourself, your growth, your health, your radiance, that's when everything around you starts to realign. I want you to imagine this. You're no longer waiting for his message. You're working out, you're meditating, you're laughing again, you're showing up for your purpose. That's when he starts to feel the shift. That's when his mind goes from "she's always there" to "where did she go?" Because when you focus on you, your energy changes. And when your energy changes, your value multiplies in his eyes, not because you're playing games, but because you've remembered who you are. When your thoughts are constantly revolving around him, what he's doing, what he's thinking, if he still cares, you unknowingly make him the center of your emotional universe. And here's what happens when you do that. You begin to orbit around him. You begin to shrink your world down to his responses, his availability, his validation. Your energy becomes reactive instead of intentional. You start to lose sight of your goals, your passions, your self-worth, because everything in you is fixated on how to get him to respond, how to get him to stay, how to make him feel what you're feeling. That's not love, that's attachment dressed as devotion, and that's not your power, that's your fear leading. What most people don't realize is that obsession is not connection. When you give him the center stage in your mind and heart, you create an imbalance. You put yourself in a place where his energy dictates your mood, his silence disturbs your peace, and his inconsistency makes you question your own value. This doesn't just rob you of your power, it becomes repelling. Because the energy of need and chase always pushes people away. It creates emotional pressure that he can feel even if you're not saying a word. But when you begin to shift that focus inward, everything changes. Instead of asking, "Why hasn't he called?" you begin asking, "What do I want to create today?" Instead of refreshing his social media, you're setting intentions for your week. Instead of shrinking your schedule to accommodate him, you're expanding your life to accommodate your dreams. This is not about ignoring him out of ego. It's about honoring yourself out of love, real self. Love isn't a buzzword. It's a daily decision to prioritize your peace, protect your energy, and elevate your standard. And when you start doing that, the dynamic changes, your energy changes. When you focus on you, you become centered, you become calm, you become radiant, and guess what happens next? He starts to notice. Not because you are begging for attention, but because your absence of need has created a space for him to feel his own emotions. He begins to wonder what you're up to. He begins to question if you're moving on. And that quiet curiosity creates a new level of attraction, not based on desperation, but based on admiration. The moment you stop making someone else the source of your happiness, you reclaim your true power. You're no longer reacting to his energy. You're generating your own. You walk differently, talk differently, even breathe differently when you're not anxious about someone else's opinion of you. You stop being the version of yourself that's on standby for someone else's attention, and you start being the version of you that lights up any room she walks into. That shift from focusing on him to focusing on you is not selfish. It's sacred. It's the beginning of remembering who you are before you started begging for someone else to see it. When you walk into a room, before you even say a word, people can feel your energy. It's not about your outfit, your makeup, or the way you smile. It's the vibe you carry, that invisible frequency that tells the world whether you are grounded, confident, and centered, or anxious, needy, and scattered. And the truth is, energy doesn't lie. You may say all the right things, but if your energy is screaming insecurity, fear, or desperation, people, especially the one you're focused on, will sense it. He may not be able to put it into words, but he will feel it. And that's why energy matters more than anything. When you're focused on yourself and not obsessed with someone else's opinion of you, your energy shifts into something magnetic. You become calm, less reactive, more peaceful, and that alone changes the way others respond to you. When your energy is clean and self-assured, you stop chasing and start attracting. You're no longer forcing conversations, checking your phone every 5 minutes, or calculating how to get a response. Instead, you're living in a state of trust. You're connected to your own worth so deeply that you don't need to beg for someone to notice you. That kind of presence pulls people in effortlessly, especially him. People are drawn to those who are already full. They're intrigued by those who don't seem to need them, but simply enjoy their presence. When your energy communicates, "I'm whole with or without you," it creates a sense of mystery, of value, of irresistible pull. Why? Because you're not playing games, you're playing your part, the part of a powerful woman who doesn't dim her light just to be seen by one man, the woman who isn't waiting to be chosen because she's already chosen herself. And he feels that. He feels the lack of emotional pressure. He feels the detachment in a way that isn't cold but deeply attractive. You're not absent. You're just no longer emotionally dependent on his validation. This new energy also puts you back in control, not in a manipulative way, but in a conscious, empowered way. You're no longer reacting to crumbs of attention. You're no longer trying to force outcomes. You're simply living, expanding, enjoying, and in that space he begins to experience something he didn't expect. The shift, the silence speaks louder now, the distance feels different, because your energy is no longer chasing. It's aligned, it's elevated, and from that space his natural response is to lean in, to feel the gap, to wonder what changed, because your presence has evolved from familiar to fascinating, and it all began the moment you decided to shape your energy with intention instead of emotion. When you begin to work on yourself so deeply that your growth becomes loud, something incredible happens. You stop needing to announce your transformation. Your results do the talking. Your energy does the talking. The way you carry yourself becomes a silent declaration of self-respect. And that kind of change cannot be ignored, especially by someone who once took your presence for granted. When you invest in your healing, your growth, your mind, your body, and your spirit, you don't just become a better version of yourself. You become someone he doesn't recognize anymore. Not because you've changed for him, but because you've finally remembered who you are without him. Growth is not just about success or money or a better body. It's about coming back home to yourself. It's about learning to love your own company again, waking up with a purpose, setting boundaries without guilt, and living a life that feels good even in silence. And when you do that, something radiates from you. It's a quiet confidence, a new kind of beauty, a presence that can't be faked or forced. You begin to glow from the inside out, not for attention, but because peace and purpose live inside you now. And that glow, that inner fire, he sees it. You see, when you're stuck in a cycle of obsessing over what he's doing, you put your evolution on pause. But when you shift the focus inward and commit to yourself, growth, like your life, depends on it. Because in a way, it does. You break the cycle. You get stronger, smarter, more emotionally regulated, and that elevation isn't just for you. It affects how others see you too, especially him. He notices you're not the same woman who waited up for his messages or adjusted herself to fit his inconsistencies. He notices that you're now the woman who chooses herself, who respects her time, who doesn't entertain confusion. The most powerful part is this: you're not doing it to get him back. You're doing it because you finally understand your value. That kind of growth, the kind that comes from pain, from silence, from being overlooked, becomes your transformation. It becomes your fuel. And as your life improves, as you invest in your physical health, your mental strength, your emotional boundaries, and your spiritual alignment, it becomes impossible for him not to take notice. Not because you're shoving it in his face, but because your transformation is now undeniable. He may not say it out loud, but trust this. He will feel it. He will feel the distance, the shift, the difference in your energy. He'll sense that the woman he thought would wait forever is no longer standing still. You're moving forward, you're rising, and that rise, that growth, that's what he can't ignore, because now your silence speaks volumes and your transformation becomes the most powerful message of all. When you detach emotionally, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with quiet confidence, you create a powerful space of curiosity. It's in that space where he begins to feel your absence in ways he never did when you were constantly available. You see, when you're always there, emotionally, mentally, physically, he doesn't have to wonder, he doesn't have to reach, he doesn't have to feel anything deeper than convenience. But the moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop showing up for every little breadcrumb of attention, he's no longer certain, and uncertainty is what triggers his curiosity. You don't need to block, ghost, or play childish games. You simply need to step back with grace. You stop over-explaining, you stop over-giving, you stop over-functioning, and in that stillness, something powerful starts to build. Not in you because you've already begun rising, but in him. He starts to notice the quiet. The energy that used to be directed toward him is no longer in the air. The texts have stopped. The effort he didn't value now feels like a loss. Your energy no longer surrounds him like a safety net, and that disruption forces him to reflect, to wonder, to feel the weight of the space you left behind. Curiosity is born not in chaos, but in peace. When you disappear in a storm, it looks reactive, but when you detach calmly without drama, it looks powerful. It makes him question what changed, and that question becomes a spark. Did she move on? Did she stop caring? Is she talking to someone else? This isn't manipulation. It's human psychology. When someone who gave freely no longer offers their presence, the mind seeks to fill that gap. That mental gap becomes emotional tension. And in the realm of attraction, emotional tension is everything. Here's the truth. If he always knows you're there waiting, he doesn't feel the need to act. But the second you stop orbiting around him and start focusing on your own life, truly focusing, not pretending, that's when his internal compass starts shifting. Suddenly, he remembers your laugh. He wonders what you're doing. He replays moments in his mind that he once brushed off. And this time, it's not because you begged for attention. It's because you reclaimed your own. Your detachment isn't cold, it's clear, and clarity creates contrast. He sees you now not as someone who needs him, but as someone who is whole on her own. That contrast from what you were to who you've become is where the attraction reignites, not from desperation, but from distance. Not from silence meant to punish, but from silence rooted in self, worth. The more you honor your peace by stepping away from the chaos, the more curious he becomes about the woman you're becoming without him. And that curiosity, that's the beginning of a whole new dynamic. One where he finally starts to wonder, did I lose her? When you stop asking, what can I do to keep him interested? And start asking, what kind of life do I want to lead? That's when everything changes. Because the moment you shift your mindset from pleasing to leading, you reclaim your personal authority. You stop living your life in reaction to someone else's decisions. You stop bending, shrinking, and compromising who you are just to stay in someone's story. You begin to write your own, and let me tell you, nothing is more attractive, more powerful, or more liberating than a woman who is living her life with intention, not as a supporting character in his journey, but as the main character in her own. So many women get stuck in the cycle of trying to be enough for a man, beautiful enough, cool enough, available enough, patient enough. But the truth is, when you're constantly trying to meet someone else's expectations, you're abandoning your own. You lose yourself in the effort to keep him, and that kind of emotional chasing leaves you exhausted, drained, and disconnected from your real power. But when you lead, when you set the tone for how you want to be treated, when you define your standards and stick to them, you stop trying to earn love and you start attracting it. Leadership in a relationship doesn't mean control. It means alignment. It means deciding what kind of connection you want, how you want to feel, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. It means walking away from situations that insult your intelligence or lower your vibration, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And here's what's fascinating. When you make that shift, people start to respond differently. He starts to notice your boundaries. He starts to realize you won't tolerate breadcrumbs. He starts to respect the fact that you're not sitting around waiting for him to figure it out. A woman who leads her life with purpose is not just attractive, She's unforgettable. She doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She moves with grace, with confidence, with clarity, and in doing so, she naturally invites others to rise to her level. You stop being the emotional caretaker, the fixer, the one constantly trying to make things work. Instead, you become the one who holds the standard, and that forces him to either step up or step aside. This shift also changes how you feel about yourself. You begin to realize that you were never too much. You were just trying to fit into places that were too small for your spirit. You stop questioning your worth because you're no longer attaching it to someone else's attention. You begin to live your life based on your own values, not someone else's preferences, and that version of you, the one who leads with love, grace, and strength, she doesn't just attract better relationships, she builds a better life. And from that place, love doesn't feel like a chase anymore. It feels like alignment. It feels like home. When you stop searching for love in someone else and start building it within yourself, you begin to radiate a kind of energy that draws everything you desire straight to you, including the love you thought you had to fight for. Most people chase love externally, hoping someone else will fill the emptiness they feel inside. But external love can never heal internal emptiness. That's why the moment you focus on creating inner abundance, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, you start attracting love not out of need, but out of alignment. And that's the kind of love that actually lasts. Inner abundance isn't just about feeling good for a day. It's about making peace with who you are and where you are, even if you're still healing. It's about knowing your worth without needing constant reminders from someone else. It's about waking up and deciding, I deserve to feel whole today, even if I'm single, even if he hasn't called, even if the world is quiet. Because when you stop trying to prove your value and instead embody it, you send out a frequency that changes how others experience you. Especially him. He may not know how to describe it, but he'll feel it. The way you carry yourself differently, the way you're no longer available for emotional drama, the way you glow from a place of peace, not performance. That's what shifts the dynamic, not the games, not the silence used as manipulation, but the silence that comes from no longer needing someone else to make you feel chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. This energy shift does something powerful. It changes the story he's used to. He's used to being the source of your joy, your anxiety, your attention, but now you're no longer reaching, you're receiving. You're no longer chasing, you're creating. He can sense the gap, and it makes him curious. It makes him wonder what's changed, and that wonder grows into attraction not because you planned it, but because you evolved. The more you cultivate inner abundance, the less you tolerate emotional scarcity. You don't beg for crumbs because you've learned to bake your own bread. You don't wait for validation because you've learned to validate yourself. And in doing so, you raise your frequency so high that only those willing to meet you there can stay in your life. That's when love becomes something sacred, not something stressful. When you finally stop outsourcing your worth to someone else's behavior, you liberate yourself. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to be seen, but because you've become so full within that the world can't help but notice, and that includes him. He begins to see you differently, not as someone who needed him, but as someone he now needs. All because you stopped chasing love and started becoming love. That is the shift that changes everything. Let's take a step back and look at the transformation that happens when you finally shift your focus inward. What once felt like a desperate chase for someone else's affection begins to dissolve, replaced by a steady, powerful connection to yourself. You no longer live on the roller coaster of his attention or withdrawal. Instead, you rise into a version of yourself that doesn't need to force love, because you've learned to embody it. The entire foundation of your emotional life changes, not because he did something differently, but because you did. You stopped waiting to be chosen and chose yourself instead. That choice reshaped your energy, your identity, your life. As you focus on yourself, everything about your presence begins to shift. You begin to stand taller, not just physically, but emotionally. You communicate from a place of clarity, not confusion. You make decisions from self-worth, not fear of abandonment, and that internal strength becomes your greatest magnet. He sees it, he feels it. Even if he can't explain it, he begins to realize that the version of you who once clung to him has transformed into someone who no longer needs him to feel complete. That realization creates curiosity, attraction, and even regret, because the energy you once gave so freely is no longer available without effort, without presence, without consistency. Your growth becomes undeniable. It speaks through your actions, your boundaries, your silence, and your peace. And while he may have overlooked you when you were centered on him, he can't ignore the woman you've become by focusing on yourself. Because now, you're not chasing, you're glowing, you're not waiting, you're leading, you're not asking to be seen. You are seen not because of what you say, but because of what you now embody. You've moved beyond the surface. You've stepped into depth, and from that depth, you attract not just attention, but respect, admiration, and the kind of love that mirrors your own wholeness. You see, when you stop tying your happiness to someone else's behavior, you free yourself from emotional captivity. You no longer shrink to fit someone's temporary needs. Instead, you expand, you create, you move, you become. You stop begging for closure and start giving yourself answers. And in doing so, you create a kind of emotional freedom that becomes so attractive, it can't be faked, copied, or replaced. You're not doing it to get him back. You're doing it because you finally understand that you were never meant to lose yourself for love. Real love only grows when you are fully yourself. And so, the entire journey brings you back to one powerful truth. When you focus on you, he focuses on you too. Not because you manipulated the outcome, but because you shifted the energy. The old you was centered on proving. The new you is centered on becoming, and that shift isn't just about relationships. It's about rising. It's about realizing that you were always the prize. Not because he sees it, but because now you do. The love you were looking for was never in him. It was always waiting to be found within you, and now that you've found it, everything begins to change. Thank you for taking the time to walk through this journey with me today. If something in these words resonated with you, know that it wasn't by accident. It's because a part of you is ready to shift, to rise, and to come home to yourself. This isn't just about relationships. It's about self-respect, growth, and stepping into the life you were always meant to live. You deserve to feel seen, heard, and valued, not just by others, but by you first. Every time you choose yourself, even when it's hard, even when it feels lonely, you're rewriting the story of your life. And trust me, your highest, most magnetic self is not found in chasing, pleasing, or waiting. She is found in stillness, in clarity, in truth. So keep going, keep growing, and never forget, when you focus on you, everything else, including love, starts to realign. I appreciate you showing up, not just to listen, but to feel. And if this message planted even the smallest seed of change in your heart, then today was a step forward. Stay grounded, stay glowing, and stay fiercely committed to becoming the version of yourself that no longer settles for anything less than what sets your soul on fire. Until next time, keep honoring your worth, keep protecting your peace, and keep showing the world what it means to truly choose yourself. The right energy, the right people, and the right love will always find you when you are aligned with your truth. Thank you, take care of your heart, and goodbye for now.